AP Biology, Chapter 22, Evolution, Part 4. When we left off last time, we drew a tree of life that showed the major groupings of kingdoms and some of the major phylums and classes that split off from each other over time. One of the things that we find in the fossil record are transitional forms that link modern-day animals and plants to things that lived in the past. One of these examples is something called Archaeopteryx. That's pronounced Archaeopteryx. Archaeopteryx. This lived 150 million years ago during the time of dinosaurs. It links reptiles and birds. It has feathers like a bird, but it has teeth and some other bone structures that are more reptilian. So this thing is thought to be a transitional fossil between birds and reptiles. We can find transitional fossils for other living things as well. We have the modern whales and dolphins that evolved from a land animal a long time ago, about 30 million years ago. The fossils that we find linking the whales to the past are found, and you can see these at a museum. One of the things that we've noticed over time with this animal is that the nostril fused together and moved up across the head. Now, it didn't move across the head in one step. We're talking small, little steps, mutations that eventually led to the nostril moving up. As far as the survival advantage, well, if you can breathe out of the top of your head, that allows you to look underwater for food if you're a dolphin or a whale, and that's a pretty successful adaptation. And if you want to actually see these things for yourself, you can go to a museum and look at these transitional fossils. This is an early tetrapod or four-footed amphibian that links our modern four-limb template to the earliest ancestor we can find with four limbs. So if you're wondering why we have four limbs and why elephants and every other mammal, bird, reptile, invertebrate other than fish have four limbs, this is the reason. And Tiktaalik is a transitional fossil linking sea and land animals together. This is well before the time of dinosaurs. All right, we're going to add to our notes. So what I'd like you to do is have a couple transitional fossils in a previous page. I believe it was page 10. It was the paper that you had with sedimentary rock fossils. So I believe you wrote the transitional fossils down in a previous paper. However, let's make sure that we complete our notes. In the Paleozoic, here we have the Paleozoic. We have our transitional fossil Tiktaalik. Let's go ahead and add that to your notes. Links the water forms to amphibians. And it's the first fossil that we find with a four-limb template. The next one I want you to write down is Archaeopteryx. That links reptiles to birds, and that was about the middle of the Mesozoic. You don't have to know exactly when, but you should know that it links reptiles to birds. The last transitional fossil, we'll talk about this in a future class, is Archaeopteryx. This is in the Cenozoic, closer to recent history. Archaeopteryx is the 4.5 million year old oldest human-like fossil that links humans, modern humans, to ancestral humans, or ancestral human-like primates. All right, moving on. Here we have another kind of graph showing some of the oxygen levels in our atmosphere. And as photosynthetic bacteria and eventually plants become prevalent, the oxygen levels go up in the atmosphere. So we have changed the atmosphere, or living things rather have changed the atmosphere over time. All right, we're moving on to new notes here now. The third piece of evidence that supports evolution is comparative anatomy. And the first thing we're going to talk about is homologous structures. Homo means the same, so homologous structures are internal structures that are the same. And you find these internal structures that are similar inside if they're two closely related species. Here we have the humerus, the radius, and the ulna, and we have some metacarpals and carpals, as well as our phalanges. The same kind of bone structures are found in all mammals. We have the humerus, radius, ulna, metacarpals, carpals, and phalanges for cats, whales, and bats. The reason why we have the same structures is that if you have a more recent common ancestor, that means there's been less changes to DNA as a result of mutations over time. That means we still have some of the DNA that is conserved for making these bones. However, there are obviously differences between these four groups of animals. So the mutations that have occurred recently, and by recently I mean tens of millions of years instead of hundreds of millions of years, we have modifications to this basic template of having a humerus, a radius, and an ulna. And depending on what species you are, determines what kind of mutations are going to shape these bones in different ways for different purposes. So homologous structures have a similar internal structure, similar development, different functions. Bat wing has a different function than a human hand or the front paw of a cat. And this is evidence of a close evolutionary relationship, a more recent common ancestor. All right, this time we'll take some notes. And this is the third piece of evidence supporting evolution, comparative anatomy. DNA sequences that produce bones and other structures are more similar in closely related species. And let's go ahead and get the bottom part of our notes here done. We'll sketch out some homologous structures, and at this time, you can pause your podcast. So remember, similar internal structures are the result of two different species having a more recent common ancestor, implies a closer evolutionary relationship, and may not have the same function. And of course, down here we have some bones inside different species. A, B, C, D, and E represent different bones. And we have a more recent common ancestor with these guys than things like insects and other animals without bones, or different bone structures like fish. Here we have some more examples of homologous structures, and these are in plants. All of these are modified leaves. Here we have the leaves of a normal plant. Needles are a type of leaf that have been modified. Succulent leaves, like on aloe vera, very thick leaves. The needles on a cactus are actually just leaves that are modified for defense instead of photosynthesis. And cacti do all their photosynthesis in their stem. Tendrils on vines and things like pea plants are also modified leaves as well, and the colorful leaves of poinsettias and other flowers. All right, so now another type of comparison we can do is analogous structures. And this is not a close evolutionary relationship. So, for example, here we have wings, which are used for flying, and wings on a dragonfly that are used for flying. So they're both used for flying. They have the same analogous function. It's an analogy. They have the same purpose. However, even though they might have a similar external form, they're kind of shaped very similar as far as wide surface area, their internal structures and development are much different, and there's a different origin for these wings. So this implies no close evolutionary relationship. Now, of course, if you go far enough back in time, hundreds of millions of years, we can find a common ancestor. But as far as any recent common ancestor, it's that doesn't exist. So even though those bird wings and dragonfly wings are used for the same purpose, flight, they are analogous structures. There's no close evolutionary relationship. They have different internal structures that evolve separate from each other. And this results in something called convergent evolution. Convergent evolution is the evolution of analogous structures separate from different species. And even though they result in the same function, convergent evolution results in the same function, in this case flight, they evolve these traits separate from each other. So the mutations in the dragonfly, the mutations in the hawk, the mutations in the bat, those were all separate from each other. They were selecting for the mutations unique to their species that gave them the ability to produce wings that could fly. So even though it's an advantage to fly in all three of these groups of animals, they have no real recent, close recent common ancestor as a result of, because of their different internal structures. Does this mean they have a recent common ancestor? The answer is no. However, they did evolve similar solutions to similar problems. Convergent evolution results in analogous structures, not homologous structures. Another example we can use is fish and mammals like dolphins. Now, if you live in the water, it's an advantage, it's a survival advantage to have a fusiform shape, whether you're a dolphin that's a mammal with a four-chambered heart, hair, warm-blooded, or a fish that's cold-blooded with a two-chambered heart. So the selective pressure of having a streamlined body is the same whether you're a fish or a dolphin, even though they don't have a recent common ancestor. These are analogous structures, not homologous. They don't have the same internal structures. Fish bones are very different from dolphin bones. Dolphins are more like us than they are like fish. The flippers themselves, however, have a wide surface area for pushing through the water, and that is an adaptation for an aquatic environment that allows them to swim faster. So convergent evolution of fins in a fusiform shape of two different types of animals as a result of convergent evolution resulting in analogous structures. This time, let's get some notes. Fresh page, comparative anatomy continued. We have our analogous structures. Different internal structures, same function, no recent common ancestor. The example I just used was bird wings and dragonfly wings. Bones and bird wings, no bones and dragonfly wings. Even if they did have bones, if they weren't the same bone arrangement, they would still be analogous. They have the same function, but no close relationship from an evolutionary standpoint. And then we talked a little bit about convergent evolution. Pause if you need to at any time to get your notes. In convergent evolution, evolving similar solutions to similar problems separately. For example, bird wings and insect wings, also dolphin and fish fusiform shape, that streamlined shape, and their fins. This last part here says fins. Convergent evolution results in analogous structures. Pause at this time if you need more time to take these notes. Parallel evolution is convergent evolution in common biomes or habitats. So for example, we have our sugar glider that's a marsupial, has a pouch. It's not a placental mammal like us with an umbilical cord. They evolved flight separate from these flying squirrels, so that's convergent evolution. Flying squirrels are like us, they're placental mammals. Australia was separated from the mainland Pangaea before the dinosaurs went extinct, and as a result, the mammals got trapped on Australia were not placental. Placental mammals didn't evolve in Australia, only marsupials and monotremes that we'll talk about in a future class. The marsupials have a pouch, and even though a flying squirrel, placental mammals tend to do better in Australia, it was sugar gliders that colonized that area first, and you just get what you have gotten from your ancestors genetically, and in this case they got a pouch. So we have a convergent evolution here. We have similar structures in similar habitats, and that's called parallel evolution. But they're not very closely related. They have different structures inside. They have the same bones, but they don't have the same breeding habits. Marsupials have a pouch like kangaroos. Placentals have an umbilical cord like us and elephants and squirrels. This ends part 4 of your notes on Chapter 22, Evolution.